The Crusades. What made them different from other religious wars? The Crusades are often viewed as one of the most significant series of religious wars in history. Spanning nearly 2 centuries, these campaigns, initiated by the Catholic Church, aimed to reclaim Jerusalem and other holy sites from Muslim control, while also responding to a range of political, social, and economic factors. However, what made the Crusades unique among other religious conflicts? Their scale, organization, theological justification, and long-term consequences distinguish them from other wars fought in the name of religion. This article explores the distinctive characteristics of the Crusades, comparing them to other religious wars and examining why they remain a pivotal moment in both Christian and Islamic history. 1. The papal authority and the role of the Church. One of the key features that made the Crusades distinct was the role of the Pope and the Catholic Church in mobilizing the Christian world. While religion has often been a motivator in other wars, the Crusades were notably sanctioned and led by the Church in a way that no other religious conflict had been. The idea of a holy war that was under the direct guidance of the Pope was a relatively novel concept. 1.1. Papal call to arms. The Crusades were officially sanctioned through papal bulls, decrees issued by the Pope that not only legitimized the war but promised participants significant spiritual rewards, such as the forgiveness of sins. The First Crusade, called by Pope Urban II in 1095, was one of the first times in history that a unified Christian effort was mobilized across Europe for a single purpose: the reconquest of Jerusalem and the defense of Christendom against perceived threats. Urban's appeal to the nobility and common people was framed in spiritual terms, as he offered indulgences for those who took part, promising them salvation in exchange for their participation. This focus on spiritual rewards and eternal salvation distinguished the Crusades from many other religious conflicts, which were often driven more by political motivations than religious fervor. While other religious wars, like the Reconquista in Spain or the 100 Years' War between England and France, also had religious elements, the direct involvement of the Pope and the promise of divine favor made the Crusades stand out. 1.2. The Pope as the leader. The Pope's role in the Crusades went beyond mere spiritual leadership. The Pope effectively became the supreme commander of the crusading movement, directing not only religious but also political and military decisions. In contrast to other religious conflicts, where the religious authorities might have been part of a broader political framework, the Crusades were distinctly church-led, with the Pope assuming an almost unprecedented level of influence over the military and political spheres of Europe. 2. The idea of a holy war and indulgences. The concept of indulgences played a central role in distinguishing the Crusades from other religious wars. Indulgences were a form of spiritual pardon granted by the Church for acts of devotion, including participation in the Crusades. Urban II's call for the First Crusade included a promise that all who participated in the campaign would receive the full forgiveness of their sins, effectively guaranteeing their salvation. This was an important distinction from other religious wars, where the justification for violence was often more earthly or politically motivated. The idea that fighting in a war could lead to spiritual redemption was unique to the Crusades and became a powerful motivator for Christians across Europe. The Crusades thus combined religious devotion with military action in a way that had not been seen in earlier religious conflicts. 2.1. The role of indulgences. Indulgences were not only spiritual but had practical consequences for crusaders. They were seen as a way to atone for sins and gain divine favor, which gave the Crusades a sense of moral legitimacy that many other wars lacked. This idea of a war being justified through religious sanction and the promise of eternal reward made the Crusades fundamentally different from conflicts that were driven by territorial or political motivations. 3. A pan-European mobilization. Another factor that set the Crusades apart from other religious wars was the pan-European nature of the conflict. While religious wars in the past had often been confined to specific regions or were fought by localized armies, the Crusades were a truly transcontinental effort involving people from different countries, cultures, and social classes. From peasants to kings, noblemen to clergy, the call to arms resonated across medieval Europe. 3.1. Religious and political unity. The Crusades were a unifying force that transcended the borders of individual kingdoms. The papal leadership gave the Crusades a unifying religious cause that brought together disparate European nations, including those with competing political interests. Unlike earlier religious wars, where political power or local grievances often played a dominant role, the Crusades represented an attempt to unite the Christian world under a single banner, that of the Church's authority. This unification under the Church's banner made the Crusades a unique phenomenon in the history of religious warfare. Other wars driven by religious motivations, such as the Spanish Reconquista or the 30 Years' War, were often regional in scope, with the religious aspect often secondary to the political and territorial stakes. 4. The Crusader states and the long-term impact. One of the most distinctive outcomes of the Crusades was the creation of Crusader states in the Holy Land and surrounding regions. After the success of the First Crusade, European knights and nobles established several states, including the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Tripoli. These Crusader states, though short-lived, marked the first time in centuries that Christian rulers held territories in the Middle East. 4.1. The establishment of Crusader states. The establishment of these states was not only a religious goal but also a political and military strategy. The Crusader states were strategically important as fortresses of Christianity in the Muslim-dominated region. The existence of these states, albeit fragile, created a permanent Christian presence in the heart of the Muslim world. The Crusaders' continued efforts to expand, protect, and hold these territories introduced a dynamic of religious and territorial conflict that persisted for centuries, culminating in the eventual recapture of Jerusalem by Saladin and the fall of the Crusader states. Unlike other religious wars, where a clear victor and a definitive peace often followed the conflict, the Crusades led to ongoing tensions and repeated conflicts over the Holy Land. The Crusader states symbolized the ambition to establish a permanent Christian foothold in the Muslim world, which would continue to shape Christian-Muslim relations for centuries. 5. The role of Islam and the Muslim response. In comparison to other religious wars, the Crusades were deeply entwined with the Christian-Muslim rivalry that had been brewing for centuries. The Crusades were not only a Christian endeavor but also a direct challenge to the Islamic empires that dominated the Middle East. Saladin, the Muslim leader, epitomized the strong response to the Crusades and is often remembered for his military prowess and his ability to unify Muslim forces against the Crusaders. Unlike other religious wars where both sides often shared similar religious backgrounds, the Crusades were marked by a clear division between Christianity and Islam, leading to a prolonged period of conflict between the two faiths. The religious justification for the Crusades in the Christian world was met with equal religious fervor and military retaliation from the Muslim world, making this conflict particularly intense and enduring. Conclusion. The Crusades stand out from other religious wars in several ways. Their involvement of the Catholic Church as the central authority, the promise of spiritual rewards, the pan-European mobilization, and the creation of Crusader states all make the Crusades a unique chapter in history. The combination of religious and political motives, as well as the creation of a long-lasting rivalry between Christianity and Islam, set the Crusades apart from other religious wars. While religious conflict has always been a part